The green light blinked once. Sarah Voss let out a breath she had been holding for 11 hours, quiet enough that no one on the bridge could hear it. Her hands were still flat on the tactical rail. The metal had gone warm under her palms, warmer than it had been in years. Around her, 60 officers stood at their stations, not moving, not speaking, watching the same number climb on the main display. 11 confirmed aboard. All personnel confirmed aboard, she asked. All personnel confirmed aboard, Captain. She did not smile. She opened one channel, the last one, and her voice came out almost gentle. Executive Solve, I know you're listening. A pause, just long enough for the words to land. What happens in the next 30 minutes is not what I wanted. I gave you every chance to make a different choice. She closed the channel. Helm, she said, take us home. Behind her, 612 human beings on the ISV Promethean Rage said nothing at all. It was the quiet of people who had already decided what they were going to do and had finished doing it. This was the moment that made the Tarkin hegemony rewrite its threat assessments. This was the warship no one prepared them for, and the crew that stopped being reasonable exactly when reason ran out. But it started 31 hours earlier, with a wedding toast Sarah Voss never finished giving. The bridge of the Promethean Rage had been cold and silent for 3 days, running dark at the edge of the Key Nebula. Every scanner array in the Tarkin border fleet read that stretch of space as empty. It was not empty. Voss stood at the rail. Her knuckles were white. That was the detail nobody on her crew ever mentioned out loud, because everyone had learned what it meant. When Sarah Voss's knuckles went white, something on the other side of the galaxy was about to have a very bad day. She checked the chrono. 41 hours since her people had been taken. Captain, Admiral Cho's voice came through on a coded burst, the kind that never got logged the normal way. You have 48 hours of operational independence. After that, I have to know things I don't currently know. Understood, sir. Sarah, a beat. Bring them home. The channel closed. Voss stayed at the rail a moment longer, looking at the gold dot on a tactical display, the one marking a Tarkin hegemony border station called Keth 7. 11 of her people were inside it. Somewhere in her mind, uninvited, she was standing at a wedding 11 months old, glass raised, watching two people she promoted 3 times each look at one another like the room was empty except for them. She had given that toast. She remembered every word of it. She was not going to remember the words of what she said next in the same way. That one would come out flat, procedural, final. Drevak, she said, full readiness. Junior Officer Drevak's hands moved across his console like he'd rehearsed this 100 times, though he hadn't, not really, not for this. The ship woke up around them. Lights that had been dimmed for 3 days came up to full. The hum beneath the deck plating climbed from nothing to a low, waiting growl in 4.3 seconds flat. 4.3 seconds. Cho would ask about that number later, in a report nobody would ever see outside 3 people's eyes only. Keth 7 sat on the border like an old argument nobody wanted to finish. 17 levels, 4,000 personnel, a detention block on sublevel 4 that most of the station forgot existed until it didn't. 11 Earth personnel had been held there for 41 hours without charge. Earth Command had filed a formal protest. The Galactic Compact Oversight Council had opened a review. The review would take between 4 and 7 months. Sarah Voss did not have 7 months. She had a list instead. Chief Engineer Dara Okafor, Navigation Officer Tomas Reyes, 7 others whose names she'd already memorized twice, and 2 names that made her jaw tighten every time she read them. Enan Priya Ma, 22 years old, and her husband, Kerman Alexei Mehta, 24, married 11 months. She had given the toast at that wedding. She remembered laughing. She remembered Priya's hands shaking around the glass, not from nerves, from joy, the good kind of shaking. Now Priya was a name on a detention manifest that Tarkin Interior Ministry had not bothered to translate correctly. Commander Yates, Voss didn't turn from the display. Fire teams ready. Ready and waiting, Captain. Just say when. Soon. Her eyes moved to a thin gap in the maintenance ring's coverage, a 17-degree blind spot in Keth 7's defensive grid that nobody at the station had bothered to patch in 6 years because nobody had ever needed to use it. Very soon. Durak, her tactical officer, glanced sideways at her, the kind of look that had learned not to ask questions when the captain's hands were flat on that rail. He'd seen her calm before. This wasn't that. This was something underneath calm, holding very still. She is not my most powerful vessel, Voss said quietly, almost to herself, almost like she was rehearsing something she planned to say to someone else soon. She's not even in my top 5. She's the ship I sent because I was trying to be reasonable. Durak didn't answer. There wasn't a good answer to give. Down in Keth 7's administrative wing, High Executive Marin Solve straightened his ceremonial collar for the 3rd time in an hour, a habit he wasn't aware he'd picked up. 61 years old, never served a day in uniform, pale eyes that blinked half a second too slow for the pace of the room around him. The human ship is requesting contact, an aide told him. Ignore it. Solve didn't look up from his console. They protest. They always protest. It's what they do instead of acting. The aide hesitated. Sir, sensor logs show it powered from standby to full combat readiness in. I don't need the number. Solve waved a thin hand, dismissive, the gesture of a man who had never once needed to duck. Humans posture. It's cultural. Acknowledge the hail. Tell them their people remain in administrative holding pending review. Station Commander Durak, a different Durak, Tarkin side, not to be confused with Voss's tactical officer, looked like he wanted to say something and thought better of it. He'd read the same sensor logs. He didn't share his executive's confidence. The hail came through at 0200 station time, Voss's voice level, unhurried, carrying nothing that sounded like a threat and everything that sounded like a fact already decided. This is Captain Sarah Voss, ISV Promethea Enraged, to Keth 7 Administration. You are holding 11 Earth personnel without charge. A pause, precise, deliberate. You have 20 minutes to release all 11 personnel to the shuttle bay. They will come aboard unharmed. And I do mean unharmed. On the station side, the Tarkin Durak reached for the release authorization without thinking twice. His hand was actually on the panel when Solve's voice cut across the room. Belay that. Durak froze. Executive, the sensor data on that vessel. Is theater. Solve straightened his collar a 4th time. Send the reply. Their deadline is rejected. Hegemony reinforcements are 17 minutes out. We will not be bullied by a species that hasn't fired a shot in 4 decades. Durak sent it. He didn't like sending it. He sent it anyway because that was the job, and some part of him, a part he wouldn't examine too closely later, hoped very quietly that he was about to be wrong. On the Promethean rage, Voss read the response without her face changing at all. Drevak, watching the small muscle at the corner of her jaw, understood before she said a single word that the 20 minutes were now a formality. He'd never seen a captain look that still and mean that much by it. Commander Yates, Voss said, the gap in their coverage. 17 degrees, maintenance ring, sublevel access. Copy that, Captain. Teams are moving. She checked the chrono one more time. 19 minutes and change. 17 minutes until hegemony reinforcements arrived, according to a bureaucrat who had never once had to bet his own life on a number. Voss did not plan to still be waiting when those reinforcements showed up. Neither, she suspected, would Solve enjoy discovering that. You'll want to hear how this ends. Trust me on that. Yates' fire teams moved through the dark hull plating of Keth 7's maintenance ring like they'd walked it 100 times, though none of them had. 17 degrees of blind coverage was a small gap. It didn't need to be big. It needed to be unwatched, and it was. On the station side, Tarkin Commander Durak caught the flicker first, a shape sliding across a sensor feed that should have shown empty maintenance corridor. He blinked twice, slow, the Tarkin way, and leaned closer to the display. Executive. His voice had gone tight. Something's inside the ring. Solve didn't look up. Define something. Human boarding signatures. Multiple. They're not slowing down. That got him to look up. Solve's pale eyes moved to the feed, and for the first time since the hail came in, his straightened collar didn't get straightened again. His hands, thin and quick, hovered over the console without landing anywhere useful. "Recall the reinforcement estimate," he said. "How long?" 17 minutes was the estimate an hour ago, sir. It's still 17 minutes. Durak's jaw tightened. They're not going to still be here in 17 minutes. Down on sublevel 4, Sergeant Hivath had been running Keth 7's detention block for 6 years without incident, which was exactly why he recognized the sound of an incident before it reached his door. Boots. Too many of them, too even, moving with the kind of quiet that only came from people who had trained for this specific hallway. He didn't reach for a weapon. He reached for the release panel instead. "I told the executive this was a bad idea," he muttered, keying open every cell on the block before the first Marine rounded the corner. When Yates' team found him, he already had his hands raised, palms out, standing next to 11 open doors. "Sergeant Hivath, Keth 7 detention," he said before anyone asked. "They're all in there, all 11. Nobody's been harmed on my watch. I'd like that noted somewhere." Yates studied him for a half-second, decided he believed him, and moved past. Inside cell 6, Dara Okafor was already on her feet, jaw set, counting heads before anyone counted them for her. Inside cell 9, Priyama made a small sound when the door opened, not quite a word, and her husband's hand found hers before either of them had fully processed that the door was actually open. Alexei had a split lip. Nobody had touched Priya. Both of those facts would matter later in a report Voss would write herself. Up above, the Promethean rage settled over Keth 7's defensive grid. The way a hand settles over a smaller hand, not crushing it, just closing around it completely. Her weapon systems came online across every port along her hull, and for a moment the station's own defensive cannons simply stopped answering their controls. Not destroyed, not damaged, occupied the way a locked door is occupied by the person standing in front of it. "She's not firing," Durak said, watching the readouts with something close to disbelief. "She doesn't need to," Solve said, and for the first time his voice had lost its certainty completely. She wasn't fighting the station. She was holding it still while 11 people walked out the door. Voss stood at her rail and watched the extraction feed in real time, one small square of her display showing Yates' team moving 11 people through a corridor toward the shuttle bay. Her hands hadn't moved. Her knuckles were still white. "Report," she said. "All 11 confirmed, Captain. 2 minor injuries. Chief Okafor is walking under her own power and already asking about a conduit repair." A pause. "Everyone's alive." Something in Voss's shoulders loosened by a fraction most people wouldn't have noticed. Durak noticed. He'd been watching her hands for 2 days. "Shuttle Bay, Eater." 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Reinforcements were due in less than that now. The number ticking down on a side display nobody was looking at anymore because it had stopped mattering the second the first cell door opened. On the station, Solve finally found something to do with his hands. He sent a priority signal to the incoming hegemony vessels, the kind of signal that should never have needed sending twice. "Accelerate," he said. "Whatever speed they're capable of, I need it faster." The reply came back cold and factual. Reinforcements were already at maximum burn. 17 minutes was 17 minutes. Durak watched his executive's face and understood, in a way he wouldn't say out loud for years, that Solve had never actually believed the ship would do what it said it would do. He had built 40 years of career on the assumption that human restraint meant human hesitation. He was watching, in real time, the moment that assumptions stopped being useful. "Sir," Durak said carefully, "the compact review, if this escalates further." "It won't escalate further," Solve's voice had gone thin. They have what they came for. He was right, though not in the way he meant it. Back on the Promethean Rage, a new voice crackled onto Voss's private channel, one she'd been half expecting and half dreading since the operation started. Captain, Admiral Cho, off the record, off every record. Talk to me. 11 confirmed, sir. 2 minor injuries. No casualties on either side. Voss's voice stayed level. Shuttles 5 minutes out. A long pause on Cho's end, and the station's defensive grid. Occupied, not destroyed. They'll have full control back the second we're clear of the system. Voss's eyes didn't leave the extraction feed. I want to be very clear about something, sir. I never fired a shot. I know. Cho's voice carried something that wasn't quite pride and wasn't quite relief. It was closer to recognition. That's exactly why this works. The channel closed. Voss stood at the rail, watching the small numbers count down toward a green light she already knew was coming, and thought, not for the first time in the last 2 days, about a wedding toast she'd never finished, and a promise she'd made to herself instead, quietly, that she intended to keep. Behind her, the bridge held its breath in the same silence it had held for hours. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. The clock was almost at 0, and every person on that bridge already knew how the next 5 minutes were going to end. What none of them knew yet was what Voss planned to say to Solve once the shuttle doors sealed. The shuttle bay doors were already cycling open when Solve's reinforcements dropped out of transit space 3 minutes early. 3 hegemony cruisers, sharp-nosed and fast, screamed into the system at a speed that should have taken 17 minutes and instead took 14. On the Promethean Rage's bridge, Drevak's voice cracked once before he steadied it. Captain, new contacts. 3 vessels, hegemony configuration, closing fast. Voss didn't turn from the extraction feed. Time to shuttle dock. 90 seconds. Time to reinforcement, engagement range. Drevak ran the numbers twice because the first answer didn't feel real. 110 seconds. 20 seconds. That was the gap the entire operation now lived inside. 20 seconds between a green light and 3 warships with a very different idea about how this was going to end. Durak's hands were steady on his console, weapon systems already tracking the incoming cruisers without being told to. He glanced at Voss. She hadn't moved. Her face hadn't changed. Only her eyes had shifted, tracking the shuttle telemetry and the cruiser telemetry at the same time, the way a person watches 2 clocks running toward the same second. Yates, she said, confirm shuttle seal status. Sealing now, Captain. 30 seconds to full lock. 30 seconds against 110. The math favored them. It favored them by enough that Voss allowed herself, for exactly 1 breath, to stop watching the cruisers. Down in the shuttle itself, Priya Ma sat with her knees pulled up, Alexi's arm around her, both of them still catching up to the fact that the door they'd been staring at for 2 days was now behind them instead of in front of them. You're bleeding, Priya said, touching the split at his lip. I'm fine. He caught her hand before it could do anything about it. Are you? I'm fine. She said it too fast, the way people do when they mean it and don't quite believe it yet. Then, quieter, 11 months. He didn't understand for a second. Then he did. 11 months tomorrow, he said. We're not spending our anniversary on that station. Dara Okafor, 3 seats down, already had a hand pressed to a bruised rib and a look on her face that suggested she was mentally drafting a very specific complaint about Tarkin detention furniture. When we get back, she said to no one in particular, I've got a plasma conduit with your name on it, Reyes. Tomas Reyes, next to her, managed a small laugh, the first one anyone in that shuttle had managed in 2 days. It wasn't much. It was enough. On the Promethean Rage, the shuttle's confirmation light blinked from amber to green, and the whole ship seemed to exhale at once, 61 people not breathing until they suddenly all were. All personnel confirmed aboard, Yates reported. Voss's knuckles, white for 2 straight days, loosened by degrees. The rail under her hands had gone warm from the pressure of them. She didn't look at it. She was already looking past it, toward the three hegemony cruisers closing on a ship that no longer had any reason to still be sitting there. "Helm," she said, "take us home." The Promethean rage came about, unhurried, deliberate, the exact opposite of a ship that was afraid of what was chasing it. That deliberateness was its own kind of statement, and every officer on that bridge understood it without needing it explained. Behind them, the three cruisers arrived at Keth 7 exactly 104 seconds too late to matter, and found a station with its defensive cannons quietly restored to full Tarkan control, undamaged, unfired, and a human warship already 3 minutes into its withdrawal vector. In the administrative wing, Solve watched the withdrawal telemetry with the particular stillness of a man doing arithmetic he didn't like the answer to. "Casualties?" he asked, though he already suspected the shape of the answer. "None, Executive." Station Durac's voice had lost whatever deference it used to carry. "Two minor injuries among the extracted personnel, nothing on our side. They occupied our defensive grid for 11 minutes and gave it back without firing a single shot." Solve straightened his collar. His hand was not quite steady doing it. "They could have destroyed this station," Durac said, quiet, almost to himself. "They chose not to." "That proves nothing," Solve said, too fast. "It proves everything, Executive." Durac finally looked at him. "It proves they never needed to. That's worse." Voss stood alone at the rail for a moment after the bridge crew returned to their normal rhythms, the tension of the last 2 days settling into something that looked, from the outside, almost like relief. She reached into a drawer beneath the tactical console, one she kept locked, and pulled out a small, folded letter she'd been carrying since the wedding. She hadn't planned to read it now. She wasn't entirely sure why her hand had gone looking for it. It was the toast, written out in full, the version she'd never actually finished saying out loud because Priya had started crying halfway through and the room had dissolved into laughter instead. Sarah Voss kept things like that. Letters, toasts, half-finished words. She'd never told anyone why. She folded it back up and put it away before anyone noticed she'd taken it out at all. It was Cho's voice that broke the moment, off the record again, careful. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." "Sir, did you ever intend to fire?" Voss considered the question the way she considered most things, slowly, with her hands still on the rail. "No," she said. "Not once. If I had, we'd be having a very different conversation right now." A long pause. "That's what worries them," Cho said. "That's what's going to worry every border station in the hegemony for the next decade. Not that you might fire, that you clearly didn't need to." The channel closed. Voss looked at the tactical display, at Keth 7 shrinking behind them, at 11 small transponder signals now folded safely into her own ship's registry. 11 names. 11 people who had crews and ships and futures that were, as of about 4 minutes ago, no longer someone else's to decide. Somewhere behind that station, she knew without needing to check, someone in the Tarkan Interior Ministry was already drafting a report that would try to explain, in careful bureaucratic language, exactly how badly today had gone. She wondered, distantly, whether that report would mention the 17 minutes at all. She suspected it wouldn't. She suspected it would say something closer to the truth than Solve would ever be comfortable admitting. That the hegemony had just learned what a species looks like when its restraint runs out, and that the number they should have been watching wasn't the 20-minute deadline at all. It was the 4.3 seconds it took a silent ship to become a loud one. 3 days out from Keth 7, the Promethean rage had gone quiet in a different way. Not the coiled silence of a crew waiting for a clock to hit zero. The other kind. The kind that comes after. In the medical bay, Priyamar sat on the edge of a cot with her legs tucked under her, Alexei beside her, his split lip healing into a thin, dark line. Neither of them had said much since boarding. They didn't need to. Their shoulders were touching, and that was most of the conversation. Dara Okafor leaned in through the doorway, one arm still strapped for the bruised rib, and held up a data slate like a peace offering. Conduit's fixed itself, by the way. Turns out I didn't need to threaten Rays after all. She paused. 11 months tomorrow, right? Priya looked up, startled that anyone had remembered. Tomorrow, yeah. Captain wants to know if you'd like the mess hall for an hour. Off the record. Dara shrugged like it cost her nothing to ask, though everyone in that room understood exactly what it cost Voss to think of it at all, in the middle of everything else she was doing. She said something about not letting the hegemony take your anniversary too. Priya laughed. It was small and rough, and it was the best sound anyone on that ship had heard in 6 days. Voss received Solve's transfer notice the next morning, forwarded through 3 layers of diplomatic channel before it reached her personal terminal, which meant someone wanted her to see it. High Executive Marin Solve, reassigned effective immediately to an interior administrative post on a world with no strategic border at all. The notice called it a promotion. Nobody who read it believed that, least of all Solve, whose name would now sit behind a desk 3 systems from anything resembling a decision that mattered. He hadn't been removed by force. He'd been removed by the shape of what he'd done, laid out plainly enough that even the hegemony's own oversight council couldn't look past it. He had gambled that a species which hadn't fired a shot in 40 years wouldn't fire one now, and he had lost that gamble without a single shot being fired at all. That was the part that undid him, not violence, the absence of it. Commander Durac, station side, the one who'd unlocked the release order and then watched it get countermanded, received the second highest citation the hegemony offered its own officers. For following procedure, the citation read, "Everyone who mattered understood it meant something closer to for being the only one in that room who saw it coming." The compact review finished 11 days later, not the 4 to 7 months Earth Command had been told to expect. 11 days, a number that would sit in a footnote of galactic policy for the next decade, quietly, the way the most important numbers usually did. Detention protocols for Earth personnel at hegemony border stations changed within the month. So did response time requirements for diplomatic escalation. Nobody called it a human warship rewriting compact law with restraint instead of weapons. Nobody needed to say it. The paperwork said it plainly enough on its own. Voss found the folded letter again on the 4th night out, the one she'd tucked away without reading in front of anyone. This time, she read it all the way through, standing alone at the rail, in the quiet after the crew's shift had turned over. It was still the wedding toast, the one she'd never finished saying out loud, the one that had dissolved into Priya's laughter and the room's noise before she reached the last line. She'd carried it folded in a drawer for 11 months because some part of her had never stopped meaning to finish it properly someday, when the room was quiet enough to hear it. The room was quiet now. There was no one to say it to. She read the last line anyway, silently, her eyes moving over words she'd written a year ago about 2 people and the kind of steadiness that survives distance, and found that they meant something slightly different now than they had when she wrote them. She hadn't known, back then, how far she'd go to make sure that steadiness had somewhere to land. She folded the letter and put it back in the drawer. This time she didn't lock it. Cho's final transmission came through late, off the record one more time, the kind of call that existed only between 2 people who trusted each other enough to say the quiet part. "They're calling you the ship that didn't fire," Cho said. "Half the compact thinks that means weakness. The other half is terrified of what it actually means." "And what does it mean, sir?" "That the next time someone tests us, they'll remember the 4.3 seconds before they remember the 20-minute deadline." A pause. "That's a longer memory than a war would have given them." Voss didn't answer right away. Her hand rested flat on the rail, and for the first time in 6 days, the metal under her palm was simply warm from the ambient temperature of the bridge. Nothing more, nothing scarred into it by pressure. "Get some rest, Captain," Cho said, and closed the channel. She stayed at the rail a while longer after that, alone, the bridge dimmed to its overnight rhythm around her. She looked at the place where her hands had gripped white-knuckled for 2 straight days, the metal cold then, warm now, holding no memory of the pressure at all except the one she carried herself. She thought about her crew, 612 people who had gone dead silent because they'd already decided what they were going to do and had done it without needing to be told twice. She thought about 11 people who had names instead of numbers on some administrative manifest, names that crews across the fleet would remember long after the paperwork was filed and forgotten. Somewhere out past the nebula, she knew, in an office on a world with no strategic border, a man named Marin Solve was updating his understanding of a species he had badly misjudged. Somewhere behind him, quieter, an entire hegemony fleet command was updating something larger, a threat model that would never again mistake restraint for hesitation. Voss straightened, took her hands off the rail, and walked toward the doors leading off the bridge. Behind her, the tactical display dimmed to standby, and the Promethean rage moved on through the dark, unhurried, in no rush to be anywhere but home, carrying 11 people who had names, and 612 who had already decided what they would do the next time it mattered. There was nothing in the known galaxy that moved quite like a human warship, with an angry crew and a captain who knew exactly where her people were.